with us now. So I'm going to just begin to kick things off here. Good morning to everybody who is with us. We'll allow a few folks to just trickle in through the waiting room, but I want to introduce myself. My name is Tommy Johnson, and I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome again to our 2021-22 season of Eaton Peabody's Growth Basics for Business. This is our monthly breakfast seminar series, which provides a forum to gain useful, do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. Now, at the beginning of the 2021-22 season, we look back at the tremendous success we had for the previous year and a half. The overwhelming response and participation and reach of our virtual Growth Basics series allowed us to make a very easy decision to keep this series virtual. Helping to facilitate that this year is our newest partner, Anania Bailey, who is our 2021-22 virtual sponsor for this event. Today's topic, cybersecurity and protecting your network, is presented by Justin Mott of Action Computer Services, ACS. We're very fortunate to have him with us today. Now, like all Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all Chamber news and events, please visit our website, portlandregion.com, check out our events page, and sign up for our weekly events newsletter when you're there. Now, before we get to today's presentation, I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions for our presenter, please type them in the Zoom chat and I will relay them to our presenter throughout the event. At this point, though, I'd like to acknowledge and welcome our presenting sponsor of Growth Basics for Business, Eaton Peabody. For the past 4 years, Eaton Peabody had been the exclusive sponsor of the series, and at this time, I'd like to invite Marketing Manager Nate Levesque to say a few words.
Thank you, thank you, Tommy. I want to take a moment to thank the Portland Chamber for doing such a great job with putting these together, providing new and engaging content every single month. Whether this is your first Growth Basics event or your 10th, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those of you that may not be familiar with our firm, we are a full-service, Maine-based law firm with nearly 50 attorneys, serving Maine clients from offices in Augusta, Bangor, Brunswick, Ellsworth, and Portland. We assist companies of all sizes in different industries. So whether you're an established financial institution or a small business taking your first steps, we can help with all of your legal needs. To learn more about our services that we provide in the industries that we serve, please visit our website, eatonpeabody.com, and be sure to follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn to stay up to date with legal updates and other future presentations that we participate in. Thank you very much, and back to you, Tommy.
Thank you, Nate. And again, those of you that have visited Growth Basics in the past know my rep here. When and if we ever do go back to doing these events in person, you'll have to definitely join us because Nate puts out the absolute best breakfast spread, the best treats and the best coffee in the business. So again, thanks to Nate. And again, thanks for sponsoring us again for this season. Without further ado, with us today is Justin Mott, the Chief Technology Officer for ACS. ACS is a managed IT service provider with a proven record of protecting networks and information systems for businesses. Their services are designed to be proactive, providing stability and safety for your information system. A new member to the Chamber, they are based in Lewiston, Maine, but serve a wide range of clients throughout Southern Maine and the Portland region. Justin has extensive IT experience ranging from project management to information systems architecture and design. He's been serving small businesses for nearly 2 decades. Thank you, Justin. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you guys so you can see what I'm looking at. And then we'll get started. Can everybody see that okay? All right.
Looks great.
So we're going to talk this morning about cybersecurity and protecting your network. It's a wide topic and we're going to go a lot of places. I'm going to try not to talk too fast. My natural pace is I talk too fast, but we're going to try and slow that down this morning for you guys. The first thing that we want to talk about is ransomware, and ransomware is a leading cause of data loss. Right now, it is probably the leading cause of data loss, according to a Gartner study, which I will send out. We're going to make this presentation available. I will actually send you the Gartner study. Any study I quote, I will find and send so that you can see what I'm talking about. But by 2025, at least 75% of organizations are going to have some form of dealing with ransomware and that kind of situation. We can read all that later, but basically a lot of organizations are suffering from this. I know a couple of local organizations are currently walking through it. One of our clients walked through it a year and a half ago. It's a real problem. And the ransomware comes from a bunch of different places, a bunch of different sources, and we're going to look at those real quick. Most of the time, ransomware is coming in via a download. You're surfing the web and you click on the wrong link and you grab it. And you can even be on a website that is fine. You can be on a website like CNN or Fox or whatever, wherever you go to get news, you can be on that website, and ads are injected into those sites. Those ads are not always good. So you can click on one of those. Emails, emails are a giant source of malicious links. Of the 2,500 in this particular study, this is a Sophos study. In the 2,500 incidents that they tracked, 29% of those, a lot of those came from clicking on the wrong link, which is why a lot of organizations will actually remove links from emails so that you're having to intentionally copy and paste it into browsers. That's a pretty common practice. You can ask who you work with for your IT stuff if that's something you should look at. It's not typically necessary, but you just need to train your users or train yourselves to not click on links that they don't know where they're going, or to hover over the link for a second so you can actually see the address when that pops up. If it's looks suspicious, starts with a bunch of numbers, you're not sure where it goes, don't click on the link. We can go down through this list, but it's attacks on remote servers are very, very prevalent. Email, again, attachments, a lot of attachments get filtered out. Again, they go through different filters, they go through different things. Remote desktop, that one's actually giant. And then sometimes you're going to get that through a partner that you're working with, which is the most unfortunate part, not most of the time. And then of course you have USB and removable media, which is very, very low incident rate because you actually have to have that on a different device. People bring stuff in from home, they don't know. It gets in, it goes. Let's see here. Let's see. The good news is most of this is very, very preventable with some very simple protections that go in place. Your best practices to create those environments, we kind of laid them out here for you. We say ensure you have the best protection. I actually should have reworded that. Just make sure you have some form of protection on there. It doesn't, your choice of antivirus does not matter. Your choice matters. Your choice matters a great deal, if we're being completely honest. You want to make sure that you have something with what's called EDR, XDR, extended, early detection and response, or extended detection and response. Basically, you want something that's going to modify its browsing, what it's preloading to your browsing habits, so that if you're a wild click on any link kind of guy, those links get taken care of beforehand. You want to have a modern firewall. I know a lot of people are working remotely, and so why do I need to have a modern firewall at my business? You still need to have an enterprise grade firewall sitting wherever you are. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward in that the things that the places that you connect from most regularly, you're going to have more opportunity to encounter some of the negative crap on the internet. And this, having those modernized systems will allow for automation in blocking and preventing those attacks. You want to make sure that whatever email provider you have is, when we talk about email providers, we're talking like Office 365, Google, AppRiver. I mean, there's thousands of them. You just want to make sure that you have one that has properly configured anti-spam and anti-phishing policies. The Microsoft uses the Compliance Center. Google has its own variation of that. The next part is you want to reduce your surface area. And what we mean by that is just make sure that your firewall, that your network isn't exposed. You don't want open ports on your firewall ever now. 5-10 years ago, you just, I have security cameras, I want to open up a port for my security cameras. You just pop it apart and fire it at your NVR, and you could see your security cameras from the outside world. Now, if you're doing that, you're actually creating a host of other problems for yourself. So you want to make sure that you don't have any holes in your firewall. It just does not go well when you've got those open. And then any ports that you do need to have open need to have what's called IPS, which is basically just an intrusion prevention system attached to it. So if it's getting hammered, the port shuts off. That's pretty nerdy. I'm sure whoever you're working with has configured that for you, but it's a question you want to jot down and ask them. Hey, do we have IPS on any open ports, or do we have any open ports? A lot of the stuff that gets real technical, you'll want to follow up with somebody, your current provider. If you have questions and you're looking for a provider, certainly we'd love to talk to you. But these are questions you'll want to ask who you're working with, and they'll know. There's a lot of people like me in the world that are more than willing to help companies understand what's happening on their networks. And when someone asks them a question, sometimes we get really excited about it because, well, no one wants to talk to us. The next piece down, again, you're going to use a VPN for remote access, or you can use a ZTNA. ZTNA is the Zero Trust Network. It's the next variation, the new version of a VPN. Anytime you're connecting remotely, or anytime you're connecting to a network that you're not, that you don't own. So if you go to a Starbucks, the best thing to do is to fire up your ZTNA or fire up your VPN. And if you're going to work from someone who's, a network that's unknown to you, or that is not owned by you, pop open that VPN. It protects your traffic, and it puts you through the proper filters and proper things. And it will just kind of reduce the incident rate that you'll experience on that device. Multi-factor authentication. Most people have instituted that now. Microsoft is making that mandatory coming up real quick. You'll see that come through on a lot of things where you have to verify it on your phone via an Authenticator app or one of those other services that exist. You can get a text, which isn't ideal, but it's better than nothing. The last piece is network segmentation. And we'll talk about network segmentation a little bit. It takes a little bit to kind of get it. It's a little technical and it's a little dry, but we'll get through it real quick. And if we have questions, we can pause up and get those addressed. So this is the graphic here that you're looking at is basically a that's the one we're after, where this is a very common deployment for small business especially. And it is absolutely brutal when it comes down to lateral movement. So basically what we're looking at is an endpoint or doesn't matter what it is, laptop, phone, PC, internal, external. They're all on the same kind of network. They all hit the switch, and they're at the switch before they're at the firewall. The firewall is not managing that switch. It's not controlling that traffic. So things can move from the bottom endpoint on the left to the bottom endpoint on the right without the firewall ever getting involved. And you don't want that. You want that managed switch puts all the traffic through the firewall, even if it's connecting through port 4 and port 5. It's going to go through the firewall to make sure that it's cleaning the traffic or that there's nothing malicious happening on the network. The problem is your endpoints are connected to that one place. And if one machine is spitting out or populating these types of, you'll hear them call on the news like supply chain stuff. When a machine has something malicious on it, you don't always know that it's malicious right off the bat. Sometimes it's on a timer and it can sit on that machine for months, and then it's going to just start populating those files over. And as those files move over from point A to point B using common credentials, you'll get infected machines laterally. So a topology like this, and when we say topology, we're just referring to how the network is set up. You've got an unmanaged switch, the go to Staples, grab the cheapest thing off the shelf kind of deal. There's a reason that we try not to deploy those and use them when they are used, use them extremely sparingly, if at all. We try to avoid it. The reason for that, again, it's not running through the firewall. So if we take a look at the next slide here, the best practice to eliminate lateral movement is having zones set up and having everything run through that firewall first. So the difference between the two is really that they colored the lines and they added you're going up into the firewall before you go down into the other switch. That can be done virtually. You don't have to have multiple pieces of hardware there. You don't have to have two switches like it shows in the diagram. That's just to make it easier to digest. You can do that virtually using what's called VLANs, virtual local area networks. Nothing crazy there. Whoever you're working with will absolutely know about those. But again, it's gonna start getting in the loop that IPS that system's gonna get used and gonna get utilized when you have this topology configured and deployed. So basically, just the question you want to ask is, hey, do we use VLANs to separate traffic? Is everything running through the firewall? Do we have a managed switch? Those are all really good questions that you can ask that'll kind of highlight what you're looking at and keep you kind of safe, honestly. Okay, so in terms of we've talked about where it comes from, what it is, what the problem is, where it comes from, and let's look at some other options that don't involve actual network equipment that we can use to clean things up. So the first one and the most important one is patch early and patch all the time. And what we mean by that is update. So when it's 4 o'clock on a Friday and you're shutting your machine down and it wants to update, and you don't want to leave until that's done or whatever that looks like, the reason that's important, the reason you shouldn't skip it, or when you're shutting down, I should say, and it says, do you want to update? And you're like, I don't want to stick around for that, or in the morning if you're coming in. Those are really, really important, especially given what's going on in the world. Patching those exploits solves and really stops a lot of the stuff that's happening. The easiest thing to do is just to schedule a time to do those, work with whoever your provider is and say, okay, we're going to do it every day at X time. And then people kind of get used to that schedule. We try and do it at the end of the day for people, not the beginning of the day, because you can walk away from a machine when it's updating, and that's usually fine. It doesn't really hurt anything. What you don't want is to skip it to the point where it forces you to do it on a Tuesday morning when you have a meeting at 8 o'clock and you're logging in at 7:45 and it's got 30 minutes of updates to do, making you late for the thing that you were on time for. So just part of the practice you want to get into is putting those on and working with whoever you work with to make sure they're happening at the end of the day or happening during off hours, which is very, very easy with some of the tools and processes that people like us have. So scheduling those is super important. The next piece that gets skipped quite a bit is end user training. So if you talk to people about, hey, we don't want to click on links, that if you're not expecting an email from someone, don't click on the link from them. Don't, watch for things that, like, if you're catching an email from your boss that says, hey, can you send me Jenny's number? And you don't have a Jenny, don't click on any link from that email. That's going to be bad. That's going to end poorly. Phishing gets more and more clever each year. And what we're seeing is things that come in like, hey, you've been sent a OneDrive document, and you click on that, and then somebody's week's getting real long. So just things like, we're not going to send you something that we're not talking to you about. Those kinds of training. There's actually training that exists that you can buy. There's also people like me that can come in and talk to you, hopefully in as plain English as humanly possible, about what to do with your end users. I know a lot of medical facilities have instituted this, and a lot of places that are using cyber insurance force you to provide some end user training to your people, so that you don't have to execute your cyber insurance, which we can talk about later if you want. But that's going to be the biggest chunk is going to be to make sure that you're talking to your users about the behavior you expect from them, having an acceptable use policy for your network or an internet use policy, depending on how you want to phrase it. But sometimes it can be just an informal conversation during the onboarding process of, hey, these are the things that we're going to ask of you. We're never going to ask you for this, and we're never going to do this, or we rarely do this. And if you have a question before you click on it, shoot me a message via Teams or shoot me a message, don't just reply to the email, open up a new email and send me an email and ask me what that was about, because it might not be for me. And some of it is teaching them how to check to see if it is from you. Check to see, check the reply. Don't just check the reply to address, check the sending address, which is fairly straightforward to do. The most important thing that you can have is a good backup, because nothing is 100%. So you want to make sure you have both an offline copy and an offsite copy, and that can be the same copy. Typically nowadays, you don't want it to be the same copy, but you can have it be the same copy. The offsite backup is just making sure that that's secure is going to solve a world of problems, in that if you ever encounter something, you can go back to it. The big giant caveat we have with backups in that conversation is, if you're not checking it, you don't have one. Flat. I mean, that sounds really mean, but truth be told, if you're not verifying that your backup has completed and you're not looking at that on a regular basis, how do you know you have one? There's been situations where people have, I have a backup, it's right here. And then when they go to use it, doesn't work. The most sophisticated attacks now, or rather more attacks are becoming this sophisticated, where they're actually attacking the backup systems first. So if they notice that you're using, Veeam, or they notice you're using, pick one, we don't need to get into that specifically, but yeah, they will actually start attacking the backup platforms first, and they'll start attacking those locations. So if you're sending something to Amazon or E3 or Wasabi or wherever you're sending it, that's where they're looking at first, because they want to corrupt that so that you have to pay them to get your stuff back. Now, 40% of the time when you pay them to get your stuff back, you're not going to get your stuff back. It's just nature of the beast. The FBI does not want you to pay them. That's a flat statement from them. So making sure you have secure backups that you're keeping on a regular interval, that you have someone checking that's gigantic. The last one is using strong passwords. Strong passwords don't have to be changed all the time. So a lot of, I remember I made my clients do it for a stretch where, you had to change your passwords every 6.5 months or something. It was just brutal. And that's not necessary anymore. Because what they find is the more often you change your password, the weaker and weaker and weaker it would become. So they now have the stance, if it's actually strong and you're using it independently of any other platform. So you don't want to have the same password going through, your Google account and your Netflix account and your ExpressVPN or whatever you're using. You want to make sure you have different passwords for everything. And there are password managers you can use that are pretty safe. You can use LastPass, you can use OnePass. There's a lot of those that are fairly safe. Again, you'll want to talk with your provider to figure out which one is the one that they want to support. Everybody's a little different on that. But having a password manager is actually good, as long as that password manager has a 2-form authentication to get into it. Again, when it comes down to it, multi-form authentication is the best protection for stuff, because you have to have the password and have a device like your cell phone that only you have, that is going to generate those numbers that you punch in. Again, you can use a cell phone for that. You can use a text. It's spoofable, so we don't love the text thing. But again, you always try and balance the security practice to the practice of running a business. So you want to make sure that you're leaving enough room in the conversation to go, well, this is not ideal, but it's better than nothing. So it's a text to a cell phone for a multi-factor authentication is better than nothing, but it's not ideal. You want to have an authenticator app that you're running. And then again, you want to make sure you're taking a backup of that authenticator app so you don't have to redo your entire stack when you're, when you switch devices.
Hey, Justin.
Yep.
We had a couple questions regarding passwords, if you don't mind going back.
Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, with regards to passwords, can you give an example of a strong versus a weak password? And then the follow-up to that is it important to have variations of that password? Like you mentioned, essentially not using the same password for your email login, Facebook, Netflix, things like that.
Yeah, so strong passwords are, the number keeps getting longer every year. So I say this now, and it won't be accurate in 2 years, but the best version now is 12 characters, 12 to 16 characters long, which, and you have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, and you're not using common words. So like Bumblebee, Bumblebee 207 is a horrific password right now. A Bumblebee 207 with an exclamation point used to be considered, okay, that's fine. It's not anymore. It is anything with a common thing that you can brute. What I mean by that, anything that you can, any dictionary word. If you have a dictionary word, adding in the middle of it is better than having it at the end. But 12 to 16 characters long, making sure you have uppercase, lowercase, making sure you have symbols and numbers, and you're in good shape there. The other question, I'm sorry, was.
Yep, sorry. Essentially, the idea of not using the same password for all your different.
Oh yeah, so having an integer that you add. If you're adding a multi-digit integer, I'm kind of okay with it. Again, it comes down to if you're using, AFE 123 at one place and AFE 345 at another place. Again, that's better than having that's better than having the same password, but it's still not advisable when half the password is known. So if the issue becomes when your password becomes exploited, they'll start adding to that when they find your login in other places. So the real answer is no, you don't want to have integers. You want to have very different passwords for all the different places. But again, you try and balance the practicality of, okay, so I either have to institute a password manager or I have to be able to log in and log out of this thing and remember what it is without losing without having to reset the password every time you get in the platform. So better than nothing, but not ideal would be the answer there, or my answer for you there.
Thanks, Justin.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. And keep the questions coming, folks. I know this is a high level topic, at least for me. So if you're apprehensive about asking questions, now's the time to do it because we've got an expert here.
Right. Feel free to interrupt. And especially some of this stuff gets super dry. So we'll be out of the slides in a few minutes, and then we'll just kind of have a conversation about some of the other options that exist in the world for you guys. But the 3 best practices for your data protection, and we've used these for years. The first one is backup process and documentation. With that, doing quarterly restoration tests is, again, if you're not checking your backup, you don't have one. And that's a scary statement. And I can make it because I actually am responsible. I'm the one in my company that checks all the backups. Quite literally when I'm off this call, that's the first thing that I'm going to do is check the backups from the night before. We do quarterly restoration tests. And that means we're spinning up a virtual environment and actually loading the data up, accessing the server, making sure that, we've got Exchange servers that run. We've got this kind of, SQL servers. We got application servers that are up. We actually go in, fire those servers up and access that stuff to make sure that the backups are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. We're checking it on a regular basis, and we're doing those restoration tests to make sure that if something happens, we can bring that stuff back. The location of where you put that stuff is incredibly important. You've got a lot of kind of the old school methodology. If I'm going to slap a tape or a hard drive, tapes are great. I'm not knocking tapes. The issue that you have, if you're only running a tape backup, you've got to remember, somebody has to remember. And usually it's, the poor accountants usually get hammered with it. The bookkeepers are the ones that usually end up having to run to the server closet, take the tape home with them because they're a trusted member of the team, which is great. They should be a trusted member of the team. They've got your numbers. But they've also got a lot of other things going on. And, on a Wednesday when it's, the kids have soccer practice or they've got stuff, they've got to make sure they grab that tape before they go from the night before, put it in their purse. Then they've got your company data in their purse, which hopefully that's encrypted. So having a tape is a good, some people only have tape, which not ideal. But there are some industries where you don't have the option to put things in public clouds or private clouds. When I say public clouds, I don't mean clouds where everybody has access to it. I mean public clouds like Amazon is a public cloud, Google is a public cloud, Microsoft's a public cloud, Dropbox, things like that are public clouds that you can access that you don't manage and maintain the infrastructure at. Private clouds are things like, configured rack space, or, if you hire someone like us or systems to go through and host your stuff for you, those are private clouds. So putting stuff there is also a pretty good idea. Avoiding volatile media, keeping track of kind of the health of the drives that you're putting your stuff on. If you are doing a drive rotation, which is fairly normal, I just want to make sure that you're keeping track of the health of those and you're not dropping them or beating on them. The reason we say to avoid volatile media is because if you have a hard drive with all of your stuff on it and you drop that drive down the stairs on your way out the door, you now probably don't have the best backup in the world. So you're looking at data loss in the incident of a recovery. So it's one of those, be careful with the media type that you choose. We use a lot of cloud backups. That's our default, unless there is, like I said, a mitigating circumstance where we cannot put your stuff in the cloud for X, Y, and Z reasons. And typically there's always something that we can do that will have those clouds come through, have those protocols come through where it makes it safe again. We work with a lot of dentist offices and doctors' offices and lawyers where we're dealing with, PHI, we're dealing with personal information. So we have to make sure that the processes and protocols that we have in place are safe. So it is doable to have a very, very safe cloud platform that you're backing up to. The other thing that I have kind of a love-hate relationship with when I say it is keeping things current, meaning if you don't need to keep your data, if there's stuff that you do not need to function, why back that up every single day? There's a lot to be gained for a smaller backup. Your recovery times shrink, your file storage cost goes down. If you're archiving stuff off, you don't have to delete it. You just don't have to back it up every day. I'm not saying you need to delete all your old stuff. What I'm saying is you can put it into a place where it costs you pennies a month to store, and you can free up some local space and improve those systems so that you're backing things up you're backing things up quicker each night, which helps, not go, excuse me. So when you're backing things up each night, it completes quicker, allowing some other tasks to happen. Maybe you've got two backups that you've got going on. You've got one going to that local drive, and you've got one going up to, Synology or wherever it's going. The last part is controlling access. So this is like threefold. So you've got physical access and digital access, and then you've got permission to use kind of access. So we'll talk about all those. So who do you know who has access to what across your network? Do you operate with the least permissions to operate? Do you have it set up so that the people that are running the cash register can see your QuickBooks? Is it set up where everybody can see everything? Do you have separate administrative users from their logins? So if Tommy is an administrative user at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Tommy has Tommy at, and he logs in with that, and that's his daily thing that he's using. And if he's going to do an administrative task, or he needs to install a program or uninstall a program or configure something, he actually is logging in with admin_Tommy at Portland Regional, Chamber, and he's logging in with a separate set of credentials. He is an administrative user, but his credentials are not flat admin credentials. So that's actually huge. A lot of people, you want to check on that. A lot of people fall into the, I'll just make every user an administrator and that'll be fine. Don't do that. It's not fine. Also, you want to avoid usernames like admin and administrator. Root is also one that you want to avoid. And again, those are all questions you can ask whoever you're using to provide your IT services. And if you're not, certainly take a look at that and check that out. So I believe that actually puts us at the end of the deck, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and just go back to here. So did anybody have any questions on, I know we went through everything pretty quickly. Does anybody have any questions about backups or network security or, platforms that you guys are running, or things that you've run into that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, Justin, I've got a question that came up and I'm going to pose it to you in just a second, but I do want to thank you first and foremost, and then let the rest of the participants know. If you do have questions, we are going to open it up so you can unmute yourself and ask questions directly to Justin. But I do have two questions that came through. If you don't mind, I will go back to one of the earlier slides. You mentioned securing any necessary open ports with IPS. Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of what would fit the description of a quote unquote necessary open port?
So if you have if you've got an application server, so you have let's say you have a web server running and you host your website in your building, you need to have an open port so people can visit your website. If that makes sense. Like that's a really good example of, yeah, we self-host our website, which not a lot of reasons to do that today, but there are some. There's some legitimate, we have, it's a part, it interacts with our local database or whatever that looks like. So IPS is baked into most good firewalls. And if your firewall doesn't have that, that's a good indication that you need to get a different one. But yeah, if you've got, like I said, a local website running, or you've got a connection from your website that is hosted to your local database, sometimes there's a port open for that. Again, there's a bunch of different ways you can secure that traffic. The scariest thing I can tell you is that most of the time, in that top, when we looked at how malware happens, how ransomware happens, when we look at that, most of the time, what people suffer from is a misconfiguration, and there's study on study for that, and I'll find one and I'll link that to you, Tommy, so we can send it to everybody. But basically, the most vulnerable thing about IT department, about information systems, is the IT department most of the time. So having an internal IT department, if you have a great internal guy, get them a little help so that they can look at things outside of, because they're going to get real close to the campus. They're going canvas, and they're going to be looking at keeping the systems up, making the end users happy, and doing all that stuff. And then the things that are important sometimes fall to the wayside. Like making sure that you're doing some form of penetration testing and, external scanning to see where your vulnerabilities are. Again, those are things that come when you have cyber insurance. Those are some of the things that kind of, you have to check those boxes before you can say, yeah, I do that, or no, I don't. And then if you say no to too many of those, they say, yeah, we're not going to insure you. And then you go, oh crap, that's not good. How do I get insured? So you have to go through and do some of those things so you can kind of audit and look at it. But misconfiguration is far and away the biggest threat that exists. And most IT guys don't love that. That is the statistic, but that's the statistic. Because if your stuff is patched and you have proper protocols in place, it's mostly fine.
Great. We had another question that came through. I think probably a lot of people like myself have the same question. It came from Ryan, and he asked, is there a way to make Google Drive more secure?
Yes, there is a way to make Google Drive more secure. You can have things like that multi-factor authentication come through. You can increase the, there's actually settings inside of Google that you can adjust to make things more contained. So you can have different containers for different departments. You can have very specific rules as far as links and documents. So there's lots of things you can do, and all on the configuration side that don't take too long to actually implement to make those things a lot safer, especially in terms of if you're using Google Drive and you're using if you're using the whole workspace suite where you've kind of put everything in there. If you're putting everything in, you definitely want to add some of those features and functionality, some of those features and some of those settings, those security policies that you can put in, and those policies will absolutely make your life safer and better.
Excellent. Just another question I have here. For a small business, or really any business that's feeling unsecure, what's the best first step to begin this process of ensuring that they're quote unquote cyber secure?
I would have a conversation with someone like me, really, where you can kind of sit down and not go at 30 miles an hour down a list of stuff, but just someone who's going to walk you through the process and use as much English as humanly possible, because they're going to talk about things like IPS, and they're going to talk about things like next gen firewalls, and they're going to talk. Our industry is fraught with acronyms, and we're super annoying about it because we drop them in the middle of conversations all the time. And if someone's not checking up to explain what they're talking about, that's bad. So having a conversation with someone like me, which, if we don't work together and you call me, we'll come out and we'll do a quick assessment of what's going on. That baseline assessment, Logically does it, Systems does it, we do it, everybody does it. They'll come out and they do an assessment of where you're at before they do anything. Before they start selling you something, they're going to look at where you are. And if where you are isn't safe, they're going to say, look, for us to help you, you've got to be here. Us to do this, we've got to do these 4 things before we can do this. So anyone who starts to sell you something immediately before having done a survey or before having really had conversations with you, that should be suspect, and that red flag should pop up, because someone really should be having a conversation with you beforehand, doing a network survey and kind of looking at where you're at with stuff and kind of getting a baseline. But really reaching out is the best thing to do. And those don't always have to cost you $1,000. Those can be sometimes, like if it's a sales thing, we don't typically charge for the sales things. And so we give away more information in there, because I've never once, in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've never once given away information to the point where I've lost work. So I don't have a problem telling you, these are the things you need to do. And this is what we would do if we were in your position. If I was running this is what I would do. So we have a lot of those conversations during that process. So yeah, talking with somebody, talking with other business owners. Hey, what are you guys doing? Is also, if you have a friend that runs the coffee shop next door, you can pop in. Hey, what are you guys doing for this? Like, how do you handle this? What do you allow your employees to do on your network? Like, do you let them go to Facebook? Some employees, that's all they do is go to Facebook, and that's what they're paid to do. But some employees don't need that. So do you want to block that stuff? Do you block that stuff? Those are all conversations you can have with people in similar positions. So attending these events, catching some of the names on the side here and saying, hey, I saw you were at that regional event. What are you guys doing? That's also a fairly low barrier to entry kind of thing. And again, every organization is going to be different, but they all kind of do. I mean, there's some crossover on a lot of it, especially when it comes down to email and, physical security and backup stuff. Everybody's got to back stuff up. So.
And thanks. And a quick plug for Justin and some of our other members. You mentioned some of your competitors. ACS is one great resource. Logically is another. You mentioned systems engineering. A plug for the chamber. If any of you have questions or where to find resources, I would encourage you to go to the chamber's website and go into our directory and type in cybersecurity, and you'll see the number of companies that come up that fit that description. So if you're looking to get started, that might be a great first place as well. Another question we had came through from Christina. She said, thanks so much for the prevention advice, but she's curious about what steps should be taken if hackers do successfully hack and ask for ransom.
So that's an interesting one, because if you've encountered that situation, the first thing that you'd need to do is, do you have a backup? That's the first question. If you don't have a backup, you've got to do some cost of time math, and you've got to look at, do you have cyber insurance? Will that offset the cost? Do you have a means to function without that data? So it's not as I can sit here all day and tell you I would never pay a ransom for data, because there's nothing, everything that's really important to my company is in between my ears. We have backups of everything, and if we encountered something, we would just roll back to a backup, and okay, fine, yeah, we'll definitely send you some Bitcoin, and then we would just roll back our backups. If you don't have that, the situation can be very different. Sometimes you can send your drives away to recovery specialists, and they can kind of get back not the version that was encrypted, but a version that is kind of a shadow copy on that drive or on that device. They can kind of pull that information back. It really depends on the situation. But the first step is getting your backup going, because if, like I said, I can't remember where I read it, and I'll see if I can find it before we send off everything to everybody. But it's the amount of times that people pay versus the amount of times they get their data back is not 100%. We can say that with absolute certainty. I believe it's around 40% of the time you get your stuff back. And if you wait too long, to respond to them, they'll delete the data right off if they don't feel you're responsive. And again, part of the thing that you want to have in your mind is most people aren't being targeted. They don't know who you are. They don't care who you are. They don't know how much your data is worth. They want to get paid for it. So it's not as if, there are some people that are being targeted. That is a true statement. But most of the time, they are just running down a list of IPs and scanning them for stuff. And when your IP gets hit, again, they don't know that you're a nonprofit that has, $14,000 in the bank. They have no idea. So they're going to say, you need to pay me $100,000 to get your stuff back. And if you don't have a backup, your options are send the drives out. You want to get somebody involved. You want to get someone like us, an MSP, or even your local guy. You want to get somebody involved in that so that we can help you on the front side, because the sooner you start working on that stuff, the better off you're going to be. But the time to recovery can be super, super long. The average for someone who has a backup to go from an encryption event to whole again, the average for someone who has a backup is like a week and a half, 2 weeks. Like that's an average thing to get everything from completely, like a bare metal recovery can be a very long process. So that's one of the things that you want to look at when you're talking about where you put your data, is how quickly can you get it back? That's one of the conversations you want to have with your provider. So you can go, okay, so if something happens, how long before that stuff can become live? We have options where we can restore entire environments inside of an hour, because that's the business requirement. So we can go, okay, if you have a complete and utter meltdown at this facility, a sprinkler head pops and you are no longer able to work in space A, we're going to put it up virtually in space B inside of an hour and a half. Those options are not inexpensive. But if you're down, and when you're down, it costs you $60,000 an hour, it's worth it to have that backup option go, okay, yeah, well, we'll just put it over there and we'll be back off to the races with no problem. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, it's, not an awesome answer, but it is the most accurate one I can give you.
That was great.
That's, thank you, Justin. And we have just one other question here. Let me make sure I get it right. What tools are available for free or that are cheap that we should be taking a look at?
So the free, there's a couple of decent ones. Microsoft Defender is decent. It's okay. It's better than having nothing. But the paid for version is only a few bucks a month. So if you're talking about inexpensive tools, that one's pretty good. We use Sophos, and we're actually CrowdStrike partners. So those are the two that we use. And again, that comes down to the user cost. So it's, for your average antivirus should be in that $5 to $7 a month in that bubble. There's a lot of really good software that exists in the world. We use the ones we use. We've had some great luck with it. None of our managed service clients since I became the CTO have actually had an encryption event. We're gonna try and keep it that way. It's a pretty decent record, but it is kind of an anomaly. Free tools. There are some free DMARC tools that can help you with your deliverability. Things like Glock apps. So that's a free utility that you can use to kind of see where you are in terms of like email and spam and that kind of thing. So it can help you kind of make sure that you're not being listed as spam. There's let's see here. If you're using platforms like Google and Microsoft, which are not free, but there are some things inside of Google and Microsoft that they include in those services. Like if you have a business standard license, there are things that are included in that business standard license that some people don't actually use. Like the compliance center, they just updated the compliance center. They've added a whole bunch of policy stuff that you can configure and change that's going to make your life pretty good in terms of spam policies and security policies. So there are some things that are included inside of paid platforms, not really free, but there are some things that are included in those that can be configured to kind of save you some hassle and some headache.
Justin, thanks again. And just finally, another great presentation today. And just a quick reminder to everybody who's on the call. Today's presentation has been recorded and it will be available for replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. A copy of today's presentation, additional details and resources will be included in the post-event email you'll receive later today. A quick plug for another upcoming Chamber event. Mark your calendars for Wednesday, November 10th. Exit Issues is back with a presentation from Maine College of Art and Design. Dr. Laura Freed, president, will lead a panel presentation and discussion on the impact the school has made on Maine's workforce and local economy. Thanks again to everyone for another great episode of Eaton Peabody's Growth Basics for Business, and to each of you for attending today and throughout the year. Another shout out to our sponsors, Eaton Peabody and Anania Bailey, for their commitment to this series. We look forward to seeing you at the Growth Basics in November on the 16th for a presentation on how to optimize your online presence with search from our partners at Spectrum Reach. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Great job. It seems like Justin jumped off. You're muted, Tommy.
Yeah, he did. I tried getting him right when we had like one participant. I was like, Justin, but he did a great job.